Hi guys, my name is John. I'm the co-founder and CPO of SOAR. Today I'm going to be talking about the token utility paradox. We've spent a decade in crypto, we've danced around tokenized equity, and it's time for a change. And so let's take a step back and let's look at when the Howey test was created. This was a time when information moved so slowly that it was literally traveling by post. So naturally, regulators said, okay, we need some consumer protection laws to prevent people from losing money on basically fraudulent companies. Now we can fast forward back to 2025. We have legal prediction markets where I can say Taylor Swift is going to wear a black dress at the Super Bowl. I'm going to throw $60K on that. So we're in this era, this technological era, where information moves so quickly that you can have real-time prediction markets on it, but consumer protection laws are pretty much unchanged. Consumer protection laws treat retail investors like children. So we're in this era where regulators say, we can't invest in these early-stage companies because we're not smart enough to do our own due diligence and make these educated decisions. And so as a product of this, we had to invent utility for tokens. There was regulatory fear. As a product of that, then, speculative demand, where because you can't assign an inherent value, you need to have some sort of speculation. Traders got conditioned to trade based on price action, and it kind of compounds. And then finally, you have the value accrual, right? If you can't have an inherent value, you need to justify some sort of price appreciation, and so that comes through these mechanical value accrual methods. So we're left with these symptoms of a utility paradox. One being there's no link between a company and a token. So you can have a very, very, very successful token that's at hundreds of millions of market cap, but your company might be worthless. Or vice versa, your token can be worth nothing, but your company worth hundreds of millions in a private valuation. And then we saw synthetic economies get created, like staking, buybacks, kind of like DAOs, and you saw those structures get created to create economic engines that would justify some sort of value. And then price becomes the narrative, where price action justifies a narrative, narrative justifies the price action, and it's a loop of nonsense. And so that brings us to the paradox, which is that everybody wanted a valuable token, but nobody wanted that token to actually represent value. So the paradox is starting to break, though, thankfully. And we're seeing it break in many ways, and we're going to this inevitable new standard. So the reasons it's breaking is because regulation is becoming clearer. We're finally starting to get some clarity, i.e. the Clarity Act. Founders are getting tired of building these mechanics into their product just to justify a value accrual method. And then holders want real exposure. We've seen these companies get acquired over the last year where the token holders that contributed to the early stage success of these companies were an afterthought in the acquisition event. And then we're starting to see infrastructure exist for tokenized ownership, DRP being one of them that SOAR created, and Futarchy from MetaDAO. So these tokens are evolving from speculative narratives to programmable equity rails. And so we have this new standard for tokens now, ownership. Ownership uses tokens to mirror economic rights. It aligns incentives across founders and participants, and it makes these tokens reflect the business and not distract from it. And so we can escape the token utility paradox when tokens stop pretending to be something that they are not. The reason we want ownership is because it is a proxy to real value. And you can manifest ownership in a token in a variety of ways. And when SOAR was being founded, we thought about these ways, and we said what's very important to holders and what's very important to founders. And so control and decision-making was one thing we considered, where token holders have some sort of influence over the direction of a company. But we thought, as a holder, I probably want to be passive. I don't want to influence the company itself. And as a founder, early-stage companies need strong leadership. They need centralized leadership. It's very important for a company to look 10 years in advance or 30 years in advance, whereas if you're holding a token in that company, you might want to influence it to give you short-term returns. And then there's treasury management, which is quite similar to control over decision-making, where a holder can influence how a treasury is used for a token. And then finally, what SOAR landed on was shared upside. And what that means is that holders can participate in the success of the company itself. And so we founded DRP. DRP is a token standard that's not dependent on utility, it doesn't have vague governance mechanisms, and there's no gimmicky mechanics. At its core, it's a debt agreement between SOAR and the issuing company, where the ratio of the circulating tokens represents an equal debt obligation to SOAR at the time of a liquidity event. So this debt instrument is interest-free, it is only callable on liquidity events, it doesn't encourage founders to do arbitrary buybacks, the founders get to retain control in their company, and it doesn't affect their cap stack immediately. And so DRP is quite a familiar structure that's been used in one form in traditional finance for quite some time. But what we've done is we've taken its principles and applied it to a modern context. And so it was inspired by the WOFI plus VIE structure. And if you're familiar with Chinese investment, this may sound familiar. So this structure was created in the early 2000s when China said, foreign investors cannot participate or invest in Chinese-owned companies that are within certain regulated or restricted industries. And so this structure was created as a proxy so that these foreign investors could invest in these companies. And so what we're doing is just taking an established structure and applying it to a new industry. So to tie everything together, SOAR believes that it's ownership or bust. If you can't have ownership of a token, and it's not a true utility token, it's basically a scam. And so what we're going to see is a return to deep value. For the first time in a long time in crypto, you can look at a company that's issuing a token, you can say, this company has value. I want a piece of that success. And so by buying a token, you're getting a piece of that success potentially. And all of this is going to happen on SOAR. SOAR is the platform that enables this. SOAR is the platform that allows founders to come and gain access to a community, and that community can then participate in these companies' success, and everybody will win together. Thank you very much. I'm John. Appreciate it.